This is a TV show called Pagan Invasion. It was released on VHS in 1994. It's basically leftover fear-mongering from the Satanic Panic era. It was like a 12-episode series. This is actually part 2. If you haven't seen the first, don't sweat it. This stands independently of the rest. I'll provide context if it's missing. This one is about the Antichrist and the Third Jewish Temple. They're about to tell us about how their incorrect interpretation of the Bible is historical fact, and if you disagree with them, you're going to hell. Let's watch.
Of all the books in the world, the Bible is most dependent upon prophecy, because the first writing prophet, Moses, said in Deuteronomy chapter 18 that there would be other prophets like him, and the only way they would be able to tell whether they were truly from the Lord and speaking the Lord's word or not is whether the prophecies they made came true 100%.
I take the Bible seriously because these 66 books, written by 40 authors over thousands of years, are an integrated message system that has its origin from outside our time domain, and it proves...
What? What does that mean? He made a really good point there for a second, that all of these books were written by 40 different authors over thousands of years, contradictory in most cases, and for that reason, it shouldn't be trusted, it seems to me, right? But what's all this about a time dimension?
Because these 66 books, written by 40 authors over thousands of years,
with you so far,
are an integrated message system that has its origin from outside our time domain.
Outside our time domain? Okay, I don't know what that means, but all right.
And it proves that by describing history before it happens.
Does not describe history. You can claim that, all this stuff took place in Queens, New York, or whatever, but we have no reason to believe it unless it's been independently verified outside of the Bible. I have no reason to believe that the story of Spider-Man actually took place, even if it was described in a document found by, anthropologists thousands of years later, does not mean that those things are true. Even if the locations described are real locations, doesn't mean it's true. You need to independently verify that these facts really did happen by looking to historians from the time period that were in the area around that time, looking for accounts that were written down about this. I mean, anything at all. There were historians around during the time that Jesus was on earth and living in the area that he was in. And there were claims about Jesus raising people from the dead, and they walked into the city. You guys remember that account? There were historians there at the time, and there wasn't a single mention of any of that. The comic book describes Spider-Man swinging around the Empire State Building and grabbing Mary Jane and taking out Venom. But none of that stuff is verified outside of, the comic books by scholars and historians that were there during that time period. There's no reason to trust any of this stuff. It's ridiculous, honestly.
And there are many examples of that throughout history. But today, we see it happening before our very eyes. The Bible describes the emergence of a super government, a global government emerging out of Europe.
Wait, what describes this?
But today, we see it happening before our very eyes. The Bible describes the emergence of a super government, a global government emerging out of Europe.
I don't remember the Bible mentioning a super government emerging out of Europe. What verse is this in? That doesn't sound right to me. Is this dude just making this shit up?
And it's happening as we speak. The Bible describes the Republic of Russia arming a group of allies preparing to invade Israel. The Bible describes, right on schedule, Israel being reestablished as a nation. The climax of all prophecy is the personal return to the planet Earth.
Dude, this guy looks just like Ron DeSantis, right?
Of Jesus Christ. And all the elements that precede that are being positioned as we speak.
I bet, totally. They're being positioned as we speak, 100%.
Exact scenario in the Bible as it relates to the events that would all come together in concert just before the return of Christ. Basically, it all begins and is triggered by the Jewish people returning to their ancient homeland and becoming a nation again.
Okay, if you're unfamiliar with the history of this, after World War II ended, I believe, Jews were relocated to Israel, basically. They were given the country of Israel. It was returned to them. Unfortunately, there were already people living there, Palestinians, and the Jewish people had the backing of most world governments at the time, militarily and otherwise, so the Palestinians were just relegated to, slums, basically. It got really, really ugly. It still is very ugly. Israel has treated Palestinians terribly, honestly, and, they deserve to be called out for that, in my opinion. They've done some really horrific, messed up stuff to the Palestinians, but anyway, 1947, I believe, is when they were placed there in Israel. And the borders were drawn. Palestine actually existed as a state in 1947, living in that area side by side with Israel. And Israel continued to push the borders and set up settlements, push Palestinians out, and turn themselves into an ethno-state. A religio-ethno-state. Deeply disturbing stuff, what happened in Israel over that time period. From 1947 all the way to now, we're still seeing this take place. Then there were 1984 borders that were redrawn. And then there were even... the borders have been redrawn over and over and over again over the years. But internationally, the United Nations, China, the U.S., I think basically every country recognizes the 1947 borders, which is most favorable to the Palestinians, least favorable to Israel. But everybody just kind of turns around and pretends nothing is happening. It's really sad and ugly, in my opinion. And if you bring this stuff up, you're called anti-Semitic. I am obviously not anti-Semitic. But Israel specifically, like J-Post and other Jewish news outlets, call people, specifically celebrities, anti-Semitic for bringing up the plight of the Palestinians. It's honestly disgusting, but reasonable people see it for what it is.
Once this came about to be called a state in May 14th, 1948, this started
I thought it was 1947, but okay.
A whole scenario of political events falling together. The prophet said that as a result of Israel being in the land, that this would trigger a conflict between four spheres of political power. Of course, the one and the most obvious one they predicted would be that the Arabs would unite together because of their mutual desire to destroy Israel, and this would be the primary reason they would unite.
Well, here's where it gets interesting, okay? There's this book called Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'm going to insert a little clip here of me explaining what it is so that you have that background, because I've talked about this a couple of times. Check this out. In 1902, newspapers in Tsarist Russia start publishing this document called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They came up with, I don't know, like 15 or 18 of them, or I don't remember exactly how many. They claimed that they found these documents on dead Jewish soldiers, and they were like articles that describe how the Jews were going to like accomplish world domination. Now, this is completely made up. It was anti-Semitic propaganda, obviously. There was no dead Jewish soldier. There were no elders of Zion. It was all completely fabricated from the ground up. But it was used to demonize a minority group within the country. And if there's one thing we've learned over the past couple of years even, it's that fascists and extremists love to blame all of their problems on minorities. Hitler, when he eventually came around, even reprinted copies of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and wrote about it in Mein Kampf, like talked about how the Jews are trying to take over and all this other stuff. But in 1923, about 20 years after it came out, it was discovered that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was actually plagiarized, full-blown, copied and pasted, or the writing version of copied and pasted, the early 1900s version of copy and paste, straight from an 1854 satire book, a French satire book that didn't even mention Jews. It was just straight up plagiarized. 80% of it was plagiarized from this 1854 book, thus putting the final nail in the coffin, proving that this was completely forged. It was fake. It was just propagandistic bullshit created by, anti-Semites to destroy the Jewish community. So that is what the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is. This is actually a copy of it right here. Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Now, it was compiled into a book in 1905 called Protocols of the Meetings of the Learned Elders of Zion. A little bit longer, but yeah, it's all fake. It was all completely faked. I'm not exactly sure how many protocols there are. 10 at least. There may be more than that. Well, anyway, protocols includes things like, just listen to like one or two lines here. In miserable Russia, the Jews are less than 5% of the population, yet they hold over 90% of the official positions. Russians and Jews are very much different, yet Russia is governed by a mere handful of unprincipled Jews. The 95% of Russians have only a 10% say-so about their own government, and even the 10% in office are but lickspittle, or fronts, to the domineering Jews. To the reasoning mind, such a condition of affairs seems impossible, yet the condition exists. In fact, a careful study to the protocols alone will clear up the mystery. Now that you've read that one sentence from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a book supposedly discovered on a dead Jewish soldier, written by Jews in power, listen to what this televangelist Lance Wallnau says. He's about to explain Seven Mountains Dominionism, or the Seven Mountains Mandate, which is the televangelist's plan to take control of the country. I'm not joking. This is from early March 2022.
3% of the population, roughly 3 to 4% of the population, are radical leftist elites. 30% of the population are evangelical born-again Christians that are inclined to go towards Pentecostal language. I mean, we're really out there. 30% against 3%, but they neutralize the church because they're also in religion. They changed the definition of marriage, so they've taken over family. They've totally taken over academia, so the education institutions are teaching leftist theology or leftist ideology and silencing conservatives. They're controlling government right now. They've taken over legacy media, Hollywood, entertainment, and arts, and now they've got Wall Street.
These are the 7 mountains, the 7 areas of society that they want to take over to control society in a Christian nationalist state, is what he's describing right now. This came straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, directly lifted from it. Did Lance Wallnau lift it? I don't know. Somebody did and provided this information to him, and he started repeating it. Somebody lifted it directly from Protocols.
This is 3%. 30% of the population is Christian. How is it that 30% are dominated by 3%? They have a worldview for bringing their kingdom here now.
I'm dead serious. This came straight from Protocols. Jews are less than 5% of the population, yet hold over 90% of the official positions. Russians and Jews are very much different, yet Russia's governed by a mere handful of unprincipled Jews. I mean, you're seeing the similarities, right? There are other similarities. I can't find it at this moment, but there's another part that talks about Jews attempting to spread Darwinism and Marxism through society because they're wonderfully destructive ideologies. They're trying to spread them through society to destroy society. Does this sound familiar? Darwinism, Marxism, saying that they destroy society. The leftists are setting out to destroy it. Seriously. Word for word, the tactics being used on the right at the moment. That's what Protocols of Elders of Zion is. That's what it's all about. That's where a lot of televangelists are getting their ideas from. Directly, I don't know. Setting out to deceive, I don't know. Are they even aware of this document? I have no idea. But it's copied word for word in some situations, and it's uncanny. Oh, here's another one. The idea that Jews eat babies, or that the elites drink adrenochrome from children. That's straight from Protocols of the Elders of Zion. QAnon is nothing more than a rebranded Nazi death cult. Every conspiracy theory you can come up with came from this document. The conspiracy theory that Jews eat babies or that they drink the blood of children, that's from Protocols. Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The idea that they control the big banks and the media and all of the other stuff, Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's from this document right here. The conspiracy theory that they try to cancel people that they don't like, cancel culture, Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's all from this. The idea that Marxism and Darwinism are evil and that they're trying to use it to destroy society, Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's all from this. Every conspiracy theory in the past 100 years that you can think of. The Great Replacement, where they're trying to bring in other groups of immigrants to destroy our culture and to outweigh votes and things like that. Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The conspiracy theory that Jewish people are trying to enslave the world or whatever other thing, it's all from this book. Dead serious. This is where pretty much all anti-Semitism stems from. Or, well, I guess that's not exactly accurate. This is a compilation of all anti-Semitism from the past 1,000 years. Thanks, past me. So anyways, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, that document was passed around the Middle East by the KGB all through the 20th century. And that is why there's such strong anti-Semitism in the Middle East, particularly from Iran, from all of Israel's neighboring countries. They all hate Israel for that reason, because they bought into a lot of the claims from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion as a direct result of what the KGB did. They did everything that they could to demonize the Jews. It's absolutely disgusting. By the way, the KGB is kind of like the CIA for the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was a block of countries back in the 50s to the 80s, was when they were in their heyday. That was the primary adversary to the United States. They battled each other, and the KGB went around getting into all kinds of shenaniganery, causing problems for people, mainly the Jews, but lots of other people too. Not saying the CIA didn't do that. They definitely did. I'm just saying the KGB made a right mess of everything. So, sorry, let's step back and listen to what he said about Arabs and their problems with Jews and stuff.
Mutual desire to destroy of political power. Of course, the one and the most obvious one they predicted would be that the Arabs would unite together because of their mutual desire to destroy Israel, and this would be the primary reason they would unite.
There is a lot of anti-Semitism in the Middle East, of course, for that reason. So,
well, we certainly see that today, and of course the latest efforts to try to bring peace to that area show how difficult it really is and how deeply entrenched the hatred of the Arabs and the Muslims particularly are against having any presence of Israel in the land of Palestine.
And the
yeah, I think that there is a lot of opposition, particularly among Arab nations, to Israel, pushing into Palestine. But honestly, that's the case with pretty much every country except for Israel. They should not be building settlements up in Palestine. Respect the 1947 borders. That's what they should do, honestly. And it's disgusting that they don't. It's not anti-Semitic to say that Israel should respect the rights of Palestinians. It's just not.
Muslim agenda is, of course, to convert the entire world by force if necessary to Islam. It divides the world into that.
Huh. Weird, huh? He says the Muslim agenda is to convert the world to Islam by force if necessary. Weird. What a weird thing for this guy to have said, huh? I wonder if I can find any examples of Christians saying anything like that. That would kind of be embarrassing, wouldn't it? Mid-January 2023.
Our events this year are different than what you went to last year, so that's why you need to come. There are 2 nights, Thursday night and Friday night. Friday during the day, you're going to have lots of training. And I hate that when I say training because that sounds really boring, and I can't stand boring. These are not boring things you're going to go to. You're going to learn, but it's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it. A lot of stuff happening. You say, well, what kind of training is that? What kind of stuff? These flash talks, I'm calling them flash talks, okay? What you're going to learn from this flash, how to go back to your house, wherever you live, and learn how to flip your school board so that your kids, if they're going to public school, you can start taking over the school board. And you go, well, that sounds like we're trying to take over the world. Yes, we are. I fully admit that. That's exactly what we're doing.
Ooh, yeah. That's not great, right? Kind of stuck his foot in his mouth on that one. Dude's talking shit about Muslims trying to take over the world by force if necessary. Oops. Kind of forgot that he was doing that, didn't he? This is Tony Perkins, second from the right here, the leader of a group called Family Research Council. It's basically a think tank, a Christian think tank that writes legislation and policy for Republican lawmakers, for congressmen. So they'll write a policy that they want pushed through, and they'll give it to a congressman so that they can put this bill up for a vote or whatever. That's the job of the Family Research Council. Listen to what the leader, I believe the founder, had to say on this exact subject. Tony Perkins, second from the right. This came out early May 2021.
We should be, happy warriors. We were created for this. It wasn't like this is just something that happens to fall upon us at this moment. Yeah. We were created to be warriors for Christ, especially as men. We're to lead our families as warriors. Now, that terminology has been maligned by the culture that we're, these, Christian warriors from a standpoint of we're trying to take over the world. Yeah, we are. The kingdom. Yeah.
Wow, just picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies there, didn't he? I guess the guy said the quiet part out loud there. In fact, they both did. This guy on Pagan Invasion is acting as though Christians don't have a vested interest, and haven't this entire time for decades, in taking over the world by force if necessary. Are you kidding me? They have had that interest forever, since long before this video came out. That's what the Satanic Panic was all about in the first place, to try to get people on the side of the Christian evangelical nutcases, to bolster their power. Just nuts. Just bald-faced hypocrisy here.
Presence of Israel in the land of Palestine.
And the Muslim agenda is, of course, to convert the entire world by force if necessary to Islam. It divides the world into that which is Islam and that which it is at war with until the...
Wow. What? This is uncanny. Okay, this is just straight up uncanny. I have heard these exact words used to describe Christianity by pastors. Like, what the hell is happening right now?
Final judgment. So we need to separate the propaganda and understand the reality that Islam is hostile, not only to Israel, but to any non-Islamic movement. And
that's nonsense. Islam is not. And honestly, Christianity isn't either. There are some extremist nutcases in each of the movements that are trying to take over the world. They're trying to take the entire system over. This guy and many, many others, Tony Perkins and Gene Bailey and Lance Wallnau and Kenneth Copeland and all of them, have been trying to take over the United States government and eventually the world in the name of Christianity. And this is a stated goal. Okay, this isn't something that I'm assuming. Nick Fuentes works on the Kanye West presidential campaign. Has also said this exact thing, word for word. Yes, we are trying to take things over. We are trying to take over the government for Christianity. Nope, no room right now, kitty. I'm intentionally pushing the wrong barrels, by the by. It lowers my love rating for Eris. I need it to be really low so that my love rating can be really high for Barrett later. Anyways, this is something that they openly admit to, that they openly want to do, to take over the world. So, yeah, okay, I guess you can complain about, some Islam extremists trying to take over the world. I don't think that they have world aspirations. I think it's more like regional aspirations. But okay, you can complain about that if you want. But you cannot, in good conscience, simultaneously attempt to take over the world in the name of Christianity. That is absurd on every level. And you're an embarrassment.
Islam is on the warpath. The so-called rise of fundamentalism is something very vivid on our horizon. We see the 5 Soviet republics that are breaking away: Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzia, Uzbekistan, and so forth. They're 5.
I think it's Kazakhstan, but okay.
5 have 3 things in common. They're Islamic, they're short of hard currency, like everybody in that part of the world, and they have nuclear weapons. So for them...
No, they don't. What's he talking about? I think most, if not all, nuclear weapons were handed over to Russia after the after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, I believe, fell in 1989, 1991, somewhere in there, and maybe 94. I don't remember. Sometime in there. And at that time, Russia made deals with all of the groups that split apart, all of the states that split up, that they would protect them in exchange for this thing or that thing or whatever else. They promised Ukraine, Russia did, back in, I think, 94, that if they protected them, they would turn over their nuclear weapons. And they did, and now Russia is invading Ukraine. So that's one of the reasons why the Ukraine war is such a big deal now. That's, neither here nor there.
For them to be drawn together, they'll obviously intrigue with their Muslim brethren in Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran.
Intrigue with their Muslim brethren. They're not trustworthy, right? The way he's framing this is all honestly terrible. There's room for the kitty, you're lying. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, there's very little room up here. If she wasn't such a chonker, then it wouldn't be a problem. But it's Chonk City over here, so only so much room. I got my keyboard on my lap, unfortunately, and my controller, too, so I can't play a game and pet the kitty both. What do you guys expect of me? I know the answer, so I'm not even going to ask.
Against Israel, because what unites Islam is their collective hatred for Israel, and
that is not what unites Islam. I mean, there are some bigoted, hateful people out there in the Muslim world, just like in the Christian world. How is this guy seriously saying this stuff with a straight face, displaying this gross hypocrisy? It's insane. It's like, yeah, some Muslims out there are complete nutcases, absolutely. There are also some Christian nutcases. You have no room to speak here. I mean, he is a Christian nutcase, this guy. Humongous heckin' fluffer over here. Oop. There you go. Good kitty. You can sit. If you're going to sit with me, though, you got to sit in the corner. Can you sit in the corner? There, she can put her little back feet in the corner of the chair, and then she can lay kind of across me, But she doesn't like to do that. She likes to have all 4 feet on my legs. I don't know why.
That has to be met at all costs, to dispossess Israel of the land which Islam views as having been once its own.
Islam teaches that it wasn't Isaac who was offered on the altar, it was Ishmael who was offered on the altar. And it wasn't Isaac to whom the promised land, the land of Palestine, was.
Okay, I don't know if any of this is true, but he could be completely making this up. But I know that there are theological differences between Christianity and Islam. What's the point? Is the point that you don't like Islam because there are theological differences? Can't we all just live together and get along, honestly? By the by, this is a specific part of this game, Final Fantasy VII, that was modified with a re-release. This originally famously said, "This guy are sick." It's because it was translated in Japan from Japanese to English by Japanese translators rather than English translators. So they spoke Japanese originally. It was their first language rather than English being their first language. And it led to some really weird translation errors. So anyway, little fun fact for you. All right, let's keep listening.
Promised, but it was Ishmael, and therefore they have a claim to this land, and the Jews are not supposed to be there. So we have this conflict today.
The second political sphere is predicted by Ezekiel and Daniel, chapter 11, verses 40 through 45, Joel, chapter 2, verses 20 to 21. where it talks about a power to the uttermost north of Israel. Now, I believe that this is basically Russia in whatever form.
That's actually really interesting. Jehovah's Witnesses have a weird thing about Russia, too, like a weird prophecy that they believe Russia fulfills, the King of the North, King of the South garbage. They just declared that they believe that Russia is the King of the North, I think. It's all completely made up, honestly. The Bible never specifically names Russia or any other one country as this great evil.
It takes in the future. But for centuries, students of Bible prophecy have looked at this and said that once Israel becomes a nation again in the last days, Russia will be one of their arch enemies, and they will join with the Arabs in an all-out attack against Israel eventually in the future.
It's really interesting to me that they're like targeting Russia so much. In recent years, televangelists have largely sided with Russia.
The main issue is the Soviet Union, despite all the lip service of disarmament, has been investing heavily in the most advanced weapon systems available to it. The Typhoon-class submarine is considered by the experts as the ultimate weapon.
So this is released in what year? I think 1991 is when this came out, I believe. When did the Soviet Union fall? The Soviet Union fell in 1991, August 1991. So it was right around the time that this was released. I find that really interesting, actually. I guess these people are still like dealing with like the Cold War era mindset, where they're all freaked out and they think that like Russia is out to get them or whatever. Which makes sense. You know, the Soviet Union was getting into all kinds of shenaniganery at the time, and there was a serious threat of nuclear holocaust looming on the horizon. I think the more time passes between the invention of the first nuclear weapon or its first use, the more time passes since that time, the less likely it is that we'll have another nuclear bomb go off, because people will understand the serious nature of nuclear weapons. That's just a guess, though.
And they had a 2-to-1 majority and still built 30 more, where they have 90 against our 30 some odd. So why are they doing this?
Sorry, let me just step back. Keep listening here.
And they had has been investing heavily in the most advanced weapon systems available to it. The Typhoon-class submarine is considered by the experts as the ultimate weapon.
Little did they know, this is 30 years old now.
And they had a 2-to-1 majority and still built 30 more, where they have 90 against our 30 some odd. So why are they doing this?
Well, there was a lot of fear-mongering at the time. I think the Soviet Union and the U.S. are pretty evenly matched, or the Soviet Union and the West more generally. There's actually a period of time where Russia had sensors, the U.S. had sensors too, that would tell them, in a satellite, it'd tell them if, nuclear weapons were launched at them. And if the sensor went off, they were instructed to do a counter launch. They launched nukes at the United States in retaliation. And the sensor actually went off at one point. But the guy that was manning the sensor thought to himself, one nuke? It was only showing a single nuclear weapon. He's like, if they were going to launch nukes at Russia, then they would launch like hundreds or even thousands, not one or two. So he did not launch a counteroffensive. He probably saved the world, and it turned out to be a computer error after all. Eventually, that guy was held accountable for not doing what he was told. So anyway, yeah, there's a whole thing about it. You can read about it on Wikipedia. It's pretty interesting.
Clearly, they have an agenda quite independent of the rhetoric and the facade of the disarmament that we so foolishly take at face value.
Oh, so it sounds like the Soviet Union had fallen by the time this came out because they were discussing disarmament, right? Either way, they're feeding into Cold War era propaganda, sounds like.
The most important thing to realize right now is
Stanislav Petrov was his name, I think. The guy's a hero. Yeah, absolutely, he is a hero. Whatever his name is. I think that may be it. But Yeah, I just wanted to put his name on record if anyone wants to read more about him. I think that's what I think you're right, Sengir. Wasn't he punished for not countering the attack? He was, eventually, yeah. At first, he was treated, as a hero. But eventually, they started questioning, like, what, are you kidding me? There were nukes coming for us, and you didn't do something about it? You should have followed orders, basically.
The Soviet Union was never predicted in Scripture as controlling the world.
That was a weird little pause, wasn't it?
The most important thing to realize right now is the Soviet Union was never predicted in Scripture as
controlling the world. Oh, okay.
Controlling the world. I often said something has to happen to stop them from gaining control of the world, because the Bible says they would not. Right now they fit into the biblical pattern even more, because now they're just a dangerous regional power that could wreak havoc with the whole world. We have to remember that even though the Soviet Union as such has broken up,
Yep, there you go. The Soviet Union had broken up by the time this came out. So now he's going to fearmonger about them even more. Okay, go on.
they still have the most awesome military machine in the history of the world, even stronger than the United States.
I don't know about that, but it rivaled the U.S. at the very least.
And the real question and the real danger today is who's going to control that?
Typhoon-class submarine.
I figured it would probably, after the Soviet Union broke up, I'm thinking the person who would control that was probably going to be your mom. I figure I'm going to start, that's my new thing. I'm going to go into a big, long description of something, like an instructional thing, and try to explain something really detailed, and then it's going to end with your mom.
Or the Tritons cost about $2 billion each, fully equipped. In 1988, the Soviets had 63, we had 34. In other words, they had about a 2-to-1 majority over us, and the capability of holding about 12,000 cities hostage, 63 times, say, 200 each. In 1988, they built 9 more at a cost of about $18 billion commitment.
Dude, this is actually really interesting, listening to old anti-Soviet propaganda. I mean, the Soviet Union was terrible, absolutely terrible, not trustworthy at all, and they definitely had it out for, Joseph Stalin, who by this time was long dead, but, he was like one of the founders or one of the leaders within the Soviet Union, I believe. Joseph Stalin was worse than Hitler, in my opinion. Worse than Hitler. He was a terrible person who did the exact same things in Russia that Hitler did in Germany. The exact same stuff to different ethnic minorities. It was really, really terrible, some of the stuff that he did. But, we don't really talk about Joseph Stalin as, the root of all evil, the way that we talk about Hitler as the root of all evil. Stalin definitely deserves a worse reputation than he has.
In 1989, they built 9 more. In 1990, they built 12 more. And the reason I bring all this up is the economic one. The Soviet Union's economy is in serious trouble. And yet, for $20, $30 billion, apparently, it could be turned around. Gorbachev has committed over $50 billion on Typhoon.
Gorbachev was the president of the Soviet Union when it fell.
Class submarines.
He actually died recently, Gorbachev did. He negotiated with Reagan multiple occasions. But yeah, Gorbachev died, and Putin didn't even give him a state funeral. I believe Putin didn't even give him a plot of land to be buried, if I remember properly. I don't even remember now exactly, but yeah. He's treated like garbage when he was like a state hero in the Soviet Union. And there are a bunch of really funny commercials because you remember capitalism was deeply hated at the time, right? And to kind of join the West and the Soviet Union, Gorbachev did a bunch of commercials with Pizza Hut and other places to try to build relationships or whatever. It's kind of funny. You can go watch the commercials now. Gorbachev in a Pizza Hut commercial. Anyway, let's keep listening.
Why? If he was building Akula-class attack submarines or other weapon systems, they have multiple uses, offensive, defensive, what have you. But a ballistic missile submarine is designed for one mission, a preemptive first strike.
They still have the nuclear weapon.
No. That's bullshit. A nuclear submarine is designed for one purpose, a preemptive first strike. No. You can have a submarine out there for a second strike, for like a retaliatory strike. Why does it have to be preemptive first strike? It doesn't make any sense at all. This is pure unadulterated propaganda. I have no love for the Soviet Union. It's terrible. But I do recognize propaganda when I see it.
Weapons to destroy the whole Western civilization in 30 minutes. In fact, bring devastation upon the whole world. They have over 30,000 thermonuclear warheads with the ability to deliver them. Right now, we do.
Dude, I think that Russia at one point reached, like 80,000 nukes or something? Just an obscene waste of money, dude, because how much money does it cost to maintain that shit? So much, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And if you don't maintain them properly, then they just decay into nothing and they're worthless to you. You have to maintain them. So how much money were they spending on tens of thousands of nuclear weapons? Seriously, oh my God. Literally propaganda. The USSR never had nearly as much nukes as the USA. Incorrect, my good sir. I believe the USSR had significantly more nukes than the US at one point. I think the US stopped at 20,000 and the USSR eventually made it up to 80,000 or something. No need to wonder, just loaded up our question gun. Let's go answer hunting. We'll find out for sure one way or another. It's estimated that the Soviet Union had approximately 45,000 nuclear weapons stockpiled at the time of its collapse. I think that they were going through the process of denuclearization, so that may not have been their peak. Oh, peak stockpile, it says about 46,000 in 1975, apparently. Let's see if we can find a source on that. Okay, the source on this is Global Nuclear Stockpiles. Oh, this is in a scientific journal, Global Nuclear Stockpiles, 1945 to 2006. Natural Resources Defense Council. The Natural Resources Defense Council is a U.S.-based 501 nonprofit international environmental advocacy group with its headquarters in New York City and offices in D.C., San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, some other places. They strive to rid our food, air, water, and household products from toxic chemicals. Interesting. Knowing is half the battle, as my friend G.I. Joe says. And here you go. Yeah, this is a list of total nuclear weapons. Soviet Union / Russia at their peak had about 45,000 in 1986. And the U.S., it appears as though we only peaked at about 31,000 in like 1967, 1965. Looks like that's what we peaked at. And then 2006, Russia had 16,000. We had 10,000. There's honestly no reason for all this. So, anyways, there's the answer. Nuclear notebook. That's what it appears to be. Learn something new every day. Absolutely. I thought it was closer to 60 to 80,000, but I guess it was a lot lower than I thought. So the U.S. had, at its peak in 1965, 31,000. Russia, at its peak, or the Soviet Union, had 45,000 in 1986, basically.
Do not know where their Typhoon-class submarines are. Most of them are at sea, and we have no idea where they are.
The Soviets, by using double lasers of the right design, can track our Trident submarines in real time from either an aircraft or a satellite. We have no idea where the Typhoons are. So the first point is that our...
Yeah, how do you think the Russians feel? They don't know where all our stuff is either. I mean, at that time, we were adversaries. That's the nature of being, adversarial, is fighting it out and one person not knowing what happens to the other person, that kind of thing. Like, this is not surprising at all. It was just an ugly time period for everybody, and I'm just glad the Soviet Union fell, honestly. I wish Russia would stop being adversarial and starting shit all over the place, not just with the U.S., but Russia was responsible in large part for Brexit. They spread propaganda about Brexit nonstop and finally succeeded. They spread propagandistic BS all over the world. Whatever they can do to cause problems for people and countries and just wreak havoc and cause chaos, they'll do. And that's how they've operated since Putin took power, at the very least. The one before Putin was Yeltsin, I think. Yeltsin was a terrible leader. Mostly terrible for Russia. But, you know, it's not fantastic. Like, Russia is just a complete train wreck, and they have been for a long, long time.
Trident, our nuclear deterrent, is neutralized.
A 4-megaton warhead can ionize the whole Los Angeles basin. And when I say ionize, it means you would not even be able to tell one building material from another. Now, they have some nuclear weapons in places like Kazakhstan, which is a Muslim province, that have 25 megaton warheads on it. Now, the world has never seen what a 25 megaton warhead could do. As a matter of fact, some military planners wonder, why would anyone ever build such a thing? Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 says that it would be primarily the Russians who would lead that last great war.
Ezekiel says it would be the Russians? Wow, I didn't know Russia existed when the book of Ezekiel was written. That's super interesting. Complete dog shit, of course.
War against the Middle East at a time when the Middle East appeared to be at peace. And so I believe we see that being set up right now. I think also the fact that the Muslim provinces are now moving rapidly into treaties with Iran, with Iraq, with Syria, with Turkey, and that there are so many Muslims in what was the old Soviet Union that Moscow has to come to terms with these, and they have to, in other words, bend to the will of what the Muslims want. The third sphere.
Russia bend to the will of other people? No. I think at this time, who was the leader at this moment in Russia? Was it Gorbachev? Was it Yeltsin? I'm not sure. Putin was not a leader yet, but they were still wreaking havoc.
Political power has to do with the Orient. And Red China.
Red China. Wow, okay.
The last remaining communist giant on earth continues to be belligerent against the West in their desire to destroy Western civilization. They have now sided with Muslim powers, even though they don't agree with Islam.
This is all just fear-mongering bullshit. Yeah, these countries were very adversarial. Yes, they, fought the United States a lot, and there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of bluster and warnings and complaining and blah, 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 yes. And, a lot of these countries are terrible, but this is most definitely just pro-capitalist, anti-communist, pro-Christian propaganda, plain and simple.
And they are giving nuclear and missile technology to some of the most radical of the Islamic nations, such as Iran.
That never happened. Iran has been trying to run a nuclear program for a long, long, long time, and they're getting closer to nuclear proliferation, too. Iran is. They have been. We set up the Iran deal, and the Iran deal was fantastic. It actually prevented Iran from building nukes. And then Republicans blew the deal up because it's something that a Democrat did. John Kerry negotiated the Iran deal to prevent nuclear proliferation in Iran, and it was successful. We were allowed to check the deal and stuff like that. We were allowed to go in and inspect their facilities and all that stuff. And because of culture wars, Republicans destroyed the deal. Disgusting. They have no idea how much damage they do to society, I don't think, honestly.
Syria, Libya. And all of this is not because they agree with them, but because they see them as a useful tool to destroy Western civilization. All of this fits into the predicted scenario. The fourth sphere of power is the most important, and that has to do with the revival of the old Roman culture and people. Eventually, I believe, out of the European economic community, there will emerge 10 strong nations that will unite.
Remember, this is basically like a Bible prophecy that he's laying on us right now.
Together and become the superpower.
Europe has a population base of 3 times the United States. With the EFTA and EC combining, you've got all the makings of a global government. The nation that can control the heartland of Europe can control the planet Earth because of the resources and the economics and its position.
It's so interesting to listen to the fear-mongering nonsense that was taking place 30 years ago, right? And think about how similar it is to today's fear-mongering garbage.
Well, it's interesting that a confederation of nations today control that very heartland.
World Trade Center.
I believe it's only a matter of time before the United States will be economically ruined by the European Economic Community. And since Russia is no longer a world superpower, this will make Europe the one superpower left.
Oh, yeah, and Europe is supposedly going to, take control of the world, and the U.S. is going to give in to the one world government or whatever other nonsense, right? Is that how it's going to play out?
It's exactly into the prophetic scenario. Now, it's the Antichrist who will come and take over these 10 nations that come out of the European Economic Community, and he will use that as his power base in order to bring about a one world government.
Totally. That checks out.
This world leader will be the most popular man that has ever walked the planet Earth. He will be embraced by the whole world as the man of the hour. He's going to bring an apparent peace. He will rise as a finance man, a peacemaker, but emerges as the most powerful dictator that the world has ever seen.
Chief and foremost.
You know what's funny? I mean, not for nothing, but this is nearly an exact description of Donald Trump. Kind of amusing to me. Donald Trump fits the criteria perfectly of the Antichrist. Now, I don't believe in any of this garbage, but if I did, I would totally believe that Donald Trump was the Antichrist for sure. Absolutely.
Foremost among these character sketches is that he will be a dynamic, mesmerizing public speaker. Apparently, this is the way he will literally sway the world. And it talks about...
Wait, literally sway, as in make it move from side to side?
About him winning the hearts of the world, not just taking power over them, but he wins their hearts. He convinces them that he is the one who can bring world peace and prosperity and security.
The Bible also speaks of him as having supernatural powers, doing signs and wonders. He's going to be a very convincing act. He's going to be the most attractive leader.
Okay, honestly, that's ridiculous. If anybody saw Donald Trump literally perform a miracle directly in front of them, that would be the tip-off that he was the Antichrist and nobody would follow him anymore.
There's a tendency, because of our spiritual orientation, to paint him in evil colors, and that is certainly valid, but it won't be apparent to the secular world. He is going to be the peacemaker. He's going to solve problems that no one has been able to solve to date, and as such will be embraced by the general population. He will be a media man's dream.
It talks about in Revelation chapter 13 that the whole world, including every tribe, every tongue, every nation, will worship him, not just follow him, but worship him. It speaks of him as being a miracle worker, a person who will appear to be a very good man. In fact, many characteristics of Messiah will be found in him. But I believe that, as Revelation 13 describes, he will be personally indwelt by Satan.
The role of this coming world leader...
I love how this is framed up like it's a documentary where in reality it's just complete garbage.
Can only be understood if one recognizes that he is Satan's statement. He is energized by and the pawn of a final scheme by Satan himself. And it's Satan's attempt to counterfeit the real Messiah in an attempt to thwart God's purpose.
This show is absolutely bizarre and seems to be obsessed with evangelical culture from that time period. It's actually really interesting to get kind of a snapshot of what evangelical culture was like in the 1990s, the early 1990s, and their take on what the Antichrist is going to be and all that. It's just bizarre, dude. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I'm fascinated by this stuff.